Right, hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Panachecast. I'm Peter Davis and this is Panache Software's weekly look at the latest sort of legal tech stories. This episode we're going to be looking at the winners of the Global Legal Hackathon, Slater and Gordon's implementation of Microsoft's managed desktop, and Deloitte's collaboration with UiPath. But before we get into that, I'd like to welcome my co-host Neil Pemberton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. See, the marketing team's been in touch this week.
I know, finally I've got my t-shirt on as well. I'm now corporate branded I should have been all along.
And I haven't. So next week I'll have to come back with corporate colours on.
Well, we don't want to be too matchy
no,
on these things.
Exactly.
So, no.
Quite right. Well, I don't know about you. We have a couple of weeks off and I've been completely swamped and inundated with requests for more shows. Have you found the same?
Not exactly, no. But, you've been talking to different people than me, but
not really, no. But I thought that was probably better than us just saying we've had a couple of weeks off. We've had a new member of the Panache Software team inducted into the business.
So, apparently so, a very small little member.
Very small member of the family,
Yeah, member of the family.
It's into the team. So we'll be showing her in future shows, I'm sure, when she takes over.
And when she starts running about in front of the camera for us.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So, but we are back now by popular demand.
Yes.
And what I wanted to do was just run through, for people who haven't seen all the previous episodes, what we've covered before. Because I know, having spoken to some of you, that there are people who have been meaning to catch up and watch the previous episodes. And if it can save you a bit of time, I'll just touch briefly on what we've covered and when.
Some of the first couple were a bit shaky on the video and audio, but I think we've secured all that now. So.
But it's the information, the quality which matters.
The quality of the info, yes, definitely.
So week one, we started talking about message encryption and use of other platforms than email to message one another, things like Facebook Messenger, which we'll come on to a bit later on. We talked largely about AI solutions, and also we mentioned the Geo6, which is a group of organizations like the Land Registry who are collaboratively working to make better use of their data.
Yeah.
Week two, we talked about the SRA transparency rules, and again, a bit on artificial intelligence again, in terms of what you need to look at before you buy a solution, and more widely and more generally, what you need to look at when you're implementing new solutions and their integration. Week three, we talked about, or we introduced the idea, the stage of the Global Legal Hackathon, and we'll come on to that a bit later. Alan Overy's Fuse 3 cohort and who were members of that, and then National Grid as a sort of case study and how they're using LegalTech and how they're interacting with their law firms. Yeah. Episode 4, we talked about EY's acquisition from Thomson & Reuters of its legal managed service business. We touched on social media for law firms and how they can make best use of it, and also data and how firms can monetize it. That was following an article in the Raconteur, which is in part of the Times. Week 5, we covered the role of the CIO in the law firm. We had some tips for them. And largely then the Land Registry's digital mortgage platform and where they're up to and how people can engage with that and who's involved in that already. And then week 6, we had our first guest, Rupert Vernals of MBA Academy, giving you a framework to help you run through the essentials of an MBA and how you can apply that to your business and strategy and so on. I think that was probably my favourite episode so far. So I like having
it was really good to have Rupert on and chat to someone else as well. And
we'll have him back at some point in the near future, hopefully. And then the last show, week 7, episode 7, we talked about law tech specifically for conveyancing transactions following an email that we'd had from Rachel. We had a discussion about an email scam that had cost a firm $600,000 when they mistakenly sent some money to the wrong account. And then Mark Cohen's 3-part article in Forbes about enterprise legal service providers. So that's what we've covered to date.
Yeah, no, it all sounds good. And just to remind everyone, as I say, we've been away for a couple of weeks, but we really want to hear back from people. And if you've got comments or suggestions about the show or want to provide any feedback on the items that we've covered, just sort of your take on those items, if you agree with something, if you don't agree with something we've talked about. And the easiest way to do that is to head over to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Panache Software. There you can find all the shows on the page. You can even get a snazzy T-shirt from us that neither of us are wearing today.
No,
but
we've modelled them in previous shows for you.
Yeah, go back to the previous show and you can have a look at those. As we say all the time, for the stuff that we're doing, the podcast that we're doing, we want to keep all this free, really.
Yeah.
But of course, your support really helps in that. So that's why we set up the Patreon. If you want to support us and help us continue making these shows and keeping them going out for free, then you can sign up on the Patreon and you can pledge, anywhere from sort of just £1.50 a month or so, just to give us a bit of support. And at higher tiers, there's a few little bonus extras in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that'd be great if you can go out and have a look. But other than that, you can find us all on YouTube and in all the podcast apps we can find.
Exactly.
If we're not listed somewhere that you use, let us know and we'll get ourselves up there as well. That'd be great.
Exactly.
But yeah, if we crack on, and the first item we want to talk about today is, again, the Global Legal Hackathon, which I think we mentioned in the first episode of the Panachecast, and then followed up with sort of the semi-finalists and that.
Yep.
And now the winners have been announced.
The winners have been announced, and there are 3 categories. I will just run through them briefly. First, for facilitating access to justice, the winner was Authority, a Frankfurt-based company that has built an app that allows you to take a photo of a letter, and that app will then summarize the letter for you, and it will remove the legal jargon and put it in plain English for you.
It's what they say, normal language, isn't it?
Normal language.
So understandable,
which is useful, and actually part of, for people who did the LPC around my time, certainly we had part of the training was learning how to write in a non-legal way. So the fact that there's an app that can do that for you now is good. The winner for improving the business of law was I'm not sure how you pronounce this, Lawreley AI. It's LAWRELAI, a solution developed by Bucharest-based legal shapers. Their app is available through Facebook Messenger and helps you with the most common legal issues that crop up when traveling abroad. And then for GRAL, which stands for the Growing Rise of Women in Legal Tech, the winner was IntelliX, a Warsaw-based company that helps lawyers find content they've created at any time in the past within Word, within a few seconds, and also it'll suggest text for you when you're drafting documents, so a real sort of time saver and helping you go. Because one of the big time losses is trying to remember where you've put certain clauses or certain text in the past, and that solution can help you with that. So 3 interesting, very different winners. They wouldn't necessarily strike me as the obvious choice in terms of what you might expect from a law tech company. They aren't providing a service to a law firm necessarily. So interesting.
It's something that we've kind of been noticing recently, and some of the other stuff we've talked about is, the first 2 on here. There's 3 winners. One of them is producing some legal tech which is aimed at firms themselves and the drafting process there, but the other 2 winners are providing sort of a legal service without being a legal firm themselves. These are people who are just getting out there with apps or other technologies to help clients and just normal customers and stuff understand some of the legal industry. And it kind of melds in with some of the previous stories we've talked about, where people like EY and stuff are buying into legal services. And it all comes around with people outside of the legal industry now looking to provide legal services to people.
They struck me as unusual winners in the sense that, as we mentioned before, they aren't necessarily geared at they don't look necessarily like huge profit-making organizations. No. But imagine yourself on holiday and needing to know what the local law is in Hungary or wherever that firm is from, or something like that. It seems to me like a solution that you might not actually ever use, but if you did need to use it, it would be extremely valuable. It's available in Facebook Messenger. I think that's how they've built it. And that's probably what people are going to be using when they're abroad. It's accessible for people. It's really a solution provided in a different way, and it doesn't fit within what I would say would be the typical mold of a law tech solution. But I initially thought to myself, well, I can't imagine any circumstances in which I would need to use this. And I suppose if you never need to use it, then that's wonderful, because you're not in trouble for any legal matters or anything you need to know while you are abroad. But actually, if you did need something like that, it looks like it would be a really useful tool, and potentially a great acquisition target for Facebook.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, it's built into a Facebook platform, but it also touches on what we've talked before about social media and the legal industry. And I think we mentioned it back in episode 4 where we talked about how legal firms can use social media and stuff like that. And this is a great example where they've built this tool into using Facebook Messenger because they're going for where the clients and the customers are, not making those people come to them. They could just as easily have created this as its own separate chatbot or something, as a downloadable app, or added it onto their website and linked to it. But there you're having to drive people to your site, to your apps and things like that. By going to where they are already, it becomes a tool that people are much more likely to use. I mean, we've discussed things between ourselves. Although the common thing is you expect people to Google everything, actually what you find now, especially in sort of younger generations, and that is they use social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram, and they live within those platforms. They get all of their information from there. They don't go to other websites. They don't go and Google things because they can just search Twitter. They can search Facebook, the platforms that they are in. So these people are going and taking advantage of that. So that, if someone's on holiday, they've got Facebook on their phone, they're using that. There's something's happened that they need to know about. So they're in their app already, in their Facebook app, and they can just launch Messenger, ask a question, and get the answers there without having to go outside of what they would normally use.
Exactly. Well, I still go to Google because I'm old school, as we talked about before. But I can't imagine going anywhere else for my information. However,
it would be odd to think of Google as being old school, though, wouldn't it? But I think that's what...
Well, 20 years old now, isn't it, Google? It's ancient.
Like
ancient.
It's getting on.
But you're right that people are searching for stuff in a new way. And as you said in week 4, when we were talking about social media, that we mentioned Kiosian Law before, who had 20,000 followers on their Instagram page. Unusual way of getting access to customers, but they are, and they may not all be customers, but when they release something and they need it, and some, if you're in California and you need legal advice, then if they're on your feed all the time, then you're going to see it. And so the same rules probably apply to this. And I suspect that, I'm not sure, maybe it's Lorelei, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but they will probably find themselves being used quite a lot if their app is available through the Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, and I don't know if these show kind of where, existing law firms, an easy route in for them into getting into these platforms and getting these new customer bases and things like that. There's a lot of services that people would traditionally think you need a lawyer for, things like will writing services and things like that, where actually that is something you can do yourself. You might benefit from legal advice in that area, but
certainly
at the end of the day, it's something that you can buy books and things which take you through the steps of writing those kind of things. Is this an area where existing firms who would like to start looking at these new avenues of providing advice and services to people could look at producing things like chatbots, could look at producing things like small apps and stuff, which just provide legal information in these areas without having to, actually get a lawyer involved and the associated costs for the client in that. Where they can make inroads into these fairly simply, I would imagine.
It's true, actually, and I hadn't thought of it before, but these were, let's keep in mind, these are hackathons, right? So these have been done in relatively short time frames. They are not enterprise solutions that we might normally be talking about and that we've talked about before, but yet they probably their reach is probably far beyond what an enterprise solution would be. So it's an interesting idea and point. Maybe some firms should be considering doing small, helpful, useful apps in these, widely
quick
used,
to produce,
quick and easy to produce if you know how to do them, and not particularly expensive.
Yeah.
But yet extremely engaging on a big scale, and potentially very, very easy to roll out across a large number of people if it's generally useful.
Yeah, because once if you can get that initial take up from people, then it puts your name out there.
Yeah.
And people will look for that in the future when they actually need fully fledged legal services from that point on.
Yeah.
If you can encroach in this initial aspect in a simple way, just get the name out there. I mean, we know the names of all the big Magic Circle firms and things like that.
Yep.
But actually, for a lot of people out there, they don't know who these firms are.
No.
And to get that initial presence out with just some simple tools, I think would really be a benefit.
Yeah.
And as we say, shouldn't cost a fortune for people to do that.
No. So for anyone who's at a firm that has an idea like that thinks it would be useful, even if it's not directly related to what your sort of main product and service is, then, if you need help getting it to code that sort of stuff, let us know. But, that there are options out there, I think, aren't there, outside of what are traditional mainstream enterprise solutions.
Yeah.
Should we move on to item 2 then?
Yeah.
Which is, this is from Legal IT Insider, who say that Slater and Gordon, in a Microsoft first, they've become the first company in the world to deploy Microsoft Managed Desktop, ousting dedicated legal technology in favor of Microsoft Stack. So Microsoft have obviously got lots of different products that you can buy, software and hardware. And Slater and Gordon have shifted a lot of their product and service onto those. Just going to read through a handful of highlights from that. All Slater and Gordon employees now use Surface Pros. They have the security of the facial recognition. I have a Surface Pro, and it creeps me out sometimes that if I just look at it, it knows it's me, and
it
then
just
opens.
logs you on straight away and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty good.
No password required. It just recognizes your face.
Yep.
We're interested to see how that works when I'm, much older than I am now, 60 or 70, if I'm still using the same machine.
I doubt you won't look like you've aged today. It'll be fine.
I don't look any different to how I used to. This is part of a £30 million plan being initiated by Chief Technical Officer Yvonne Ferguson, as S&G aim to transform the way that consumers receive legal services. So interesting that they're focusing on the customer, and how they are receiving their services. She's also tasked with digitizing and broadening Slater and Gordon's services. They've stopped using Big Hand, which is the digital dictation platform, and are using Microsoft's speech recognition tool Cortana. That's free to download for anyone that wants to use it. They've replaced ClickView with Microsoft Power BI, for their reporting and analytics. They've moved all data to the Microsoft Azure platform. They're reducing office space, and employees are now hot desking and working from home. This will be familiar to a lot of people, I'm sure. They've reduced the number of admin staff, and there are lots of other points that we can talk about. Do you want to take us through the final point about the working landscape changing? Yeah,
well, I think the move to this on sort of Slater and Gordon's part, and the reason I wanted to include this is more to talk about the shifting sort of IT landscape and the shifting working landscape that firms are now coming across. I mean, up until a few years ago, you would expect everyone will be in the office 9 to 5, and that's it.
You're talking about lawyers here. We're talking about 9 till 9, or
9 to 9. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what they say on the billable hours. But I'm not sure if that's actually what they work. I don't know.
How dare you?
I've got no evidence for that. But yeah, exactly. So you're expected to clock on in the morning, and you're at your desk all day working along. And I think what people are finding now is that though the times are changing, and people are now expecting to be able to work remotely, work from home, or work during their commute and things like that. And it's taken a lot for the businesses and the IT infrastructure to catch up with that. And also the mindset of those industries to accept that people can be productive working from home, that you don't have, the manager doesn't have to be in the office looking at you and see you to know you're working. And there was an interesting story that came out within the last couple of weeks as well, that not necessarily related to this, but was an article for Simply Business, who in their call center, where it was quite a high pressure environment, they've actually moved or are trialing a move to a 4-day week. So moving from 37.5 hours to 30 hours a week, with no loss in pay. So they're effectively just reducing the hours for the same pay, so giving people pay rise, really.
20% pay rise, same salary, but
less,
20% fewer hours.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason that they're doing stuff is that they're suggesting that in doing that in those reduced hours, people actually work harder in those hours. They're more productive in those hours, and also they have reduced sort of sick leave and absences because people aren't working so much. So although the actual working hours are reduced, they're not having any detriment to the actual service they get from their employees.
The output is as good.
Now there's some additional firms who have looked into this. I think Wellcome Trust actually looked into doing the same kind of thing in their head office, but couldn't get it to work from them. So I don't think it's a catch-all scenario, but it shows that things are changing and people are having to change. And these kind of services from Microsoft, things like their managed desktop, allow that more flexible working a lot easier. So they allow you to bring your own devices. They allow there's things like back in the day, I know when I worked in that sort of IT infrastructure area, people would get new machines. The IT department would have to get them, image them first, install the OS on them, and set up all the apps, and then hand it to the person. The whole point of the Microsoft managed desktop and their tools like Intune and I think Autopilot that come part of that is that you just ship a staff member a new Surface Pro. As it comes out of the box, they turn it on, connect it to a network, and these tools actually install everything on it and set it up for them there and then. So without any input from IT at all. That's a massive time saver.
Well, yeah, and I'd not realised that, but that goes directly to the point of what we've said before and what we continue to say, which is we're not necessarily talking about removing or coming up with a fancy AI solution that eliminates, reading of contracts and so on. It's any automation or any time saver, as long as it's an administrative time save, is worth exploring, right? So I'd not realised any of that. So I suppose, let me ask a question then. If I go out and spend £500 on a Dell, £500 on a Dell or an HP or something, and then I have to install the Microsoft Office platform, or even if it's I don't know how these work, centrally networked system, maybe we're operating on some ancient version of Microsoft's. Windows 2010 or something. Would that be considered ancient in today's business world? Probably not, actually.
It probably wouldn't be nowadays, but it is.
Well, it's 9 years old, isn't it? So back to the question, I go out and spend £500 on a Dell or an HP, thinking that I'm saving myself, let's say £1,000, because I think Surface Book's coming at about £1,500, something like that. There's £1,000 cost saving or price saving. But the cost actually is potentially significantly more with a Dell or with an HP, or I'm not picking on those brands, but any non sort of top of the range spec machine, because you're having to spend IT admin time getting that up to speed. Yeah,
and I think that the simple way that people look to make savings in IT is by reducing the IT spend on things like laptops and other devices, and that we can get a device for cheaper, so why wouldn't we do that? Now for me, I always think that's the wrong way of looking at things. I've worked in organizations before where you get really bad laptops, or you get a second-hand laptop from someone,
or you don't get a laptop,
or you don't get a laptop at all. I'm forever hearing my wife complaining about her laptop and firing up applications takes so long. And I'm sure you've had this experience in your organisation as well. And you have to look at where the cost savings are coming from then. So say I've saved £500, £1,000 on this laptop, but my fee earner, who is charged out at £250 or more an hour, takes sort of 5, 6, 7 hours a week wasted in messing about with their laptop, updating, things being slow, not being able to connect things. You haven't saved any money by skimping on the equipment. And I think very passionately that you should be providing the best equipment you can to your client, to your staff, and the best software and services to allow them to do their job more efficiently.
I was thinking about this on the way over here, and rather than concentrating on the road, I was thinking about what I was going to say. No, that's not true. But
you know plenty of lawyers just in case you get in trouble, so it's fine.
I don't know any road traffic accident lawyers, thanks. But anyway, that's not been an issue. Anyway, we digress. No, I was thinking about that myself earlier. I mean, lots of firms are spending a lot of money. We've talked about the incubation and the accelerator platforms before, and there's a big spend and a big push on we're using the latest software, the latest AI, we're looking at blockchain, and we're looking at this and we're looking at that. And actually, let's peel it back to its most basic, do all of your staff have laptops? No. I mean, almost no firm, yes, some of the absolute top firms will have laptops for all, docking stations for all. They will have that. But there are a lot of firms out there right the way through. Don't forget, we're not picking one particular firm over another, but the whole spectrum of firms, 99% of them won't have laptops for their people. They probably still have desktops. They probably still expect them to turn up 5 days a week. It's probably the minority that have that top of the range stuff. Yeah. There's a big spend. It's a big outlay to get that stuff. But why claim that you have all the latest software solutions when you don't even have the best hardware solutions for your people? Yeah. And there's been a big push for at least 10 years in the legal industry to move towards paperless for environmental reasons, but also, let's face it, for cost reasons, because paper is a cost, especially in law firms where they're printing lots and lots of contracts out. And I'm a 2008 qualifier, right? So I'm still of the paper era, and it's going to be difficult to get someone like me or older onto electronic files and a paperless way of working. But I'm certainly not going to achieve that if I have tools which mean I can only look at one or two things on the screen at once, where I need to be looking across a whole load of different things, or where my way of working is to print stuff out and scribble on it and say, I've looked at that and I've checked it. I don't need to repeat myself, because how else would I keep on top of it? Well, I'd keep a database, right? A spreadsheet that says I've read it. But that's just maintaining another thing. Yeah. What I want is something like a Surface Book, which comes with a pen, allows me to scribble on the screen and say, or tick it and say, I've done that, on to the next thing. Having those modern tools would allow you to do that, but the firms just aren't providing those to their people. Now, it probably comes down to a capital outlay, but like we said before, the capital outlay, it's an obvious difference in price, but the overall cost, I would suggest, is probably lower, spending more money on a better piece of hardware, because your IT people aren't working on it for as long, and also your staff are more productive. Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, one of the key things from moving to something like the Microsoft Managed Desktop, and there's other solutions provided by people like Citrix and stuff as well, that offer the same kind of ways of rolling out desktop environments to people. But one of the things that this actually pushes is ensuring that everything is kept up to date on someone's system. Yeah. So you're using the latest versions of Office, you're using the latest versions of Windows, and the applications associated with that, and keeping them always secure and tightened up. Now, one of the big things that most organizations have is legacy software. That means it's difficult to move to the latest versions of Office, and you quite often find
people still running Office 2010 or earlier
Yeah.
in organizations. And that's primarily because they haven't been able to move because some bit of legacy software still requires it.
Yeah.
And one of the issues I find is that, yes, the outlay of replacing that legacy software is going to be significant.
Yeah.
But the downside of having to stay behind the curve is probably greater than biting the bullet and saying, no, we're going to move to the latest. And these new tools, things like Intune and stuff by Microsoft, they allow you to keep those systems up and running. I mean, once people move to Office 365, their packages, the Office packages, are kept up to date continuously.
Yeah.
You're always running the latest version.
Yeah.
And that's where you want to be.
Exactly.
And the tools that you should be looking at to buy as new software implementations for yourselves, you want to be looking at the tools that are more sort of web-based and things like that, so that you're not held back as a legacy application, that you don't have to worry about what OS version it's running on or anything like that. You can always move your infrastructure forward.
Yeah.
Don't look for those tools which, they have to be installed on someone's desktop. You can only certain versions are supported on these versions. These newer solutions which are more web-based allow you that freedom to move along with the market and along with the advances in technology.
Well, that's one of the points that comes out of this for us, is the whole idea of agility, and it's not just agility is not just people working from home or people working in an agile way. It's the equipment to facilitate that, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other thing, just to mention briefly, I don't think it's anything like as significant as the agility point, but the existing Microsoft package is obviously all well integrated with itself, and there will be lots of tools in there that people may not be familiar with, but that will produce a lot of output for them if they knew how to use them. And we've mentioned before, and I've said that my preference would always be to have a single sort of user interface or a single destination, if you like, for my work. And I would rather solve, if I go back to that analogy of having 10 problems, I'd rather solve 10% of each problem than 100% of one. Yeah. And this would allow you to do that, and it probably allow you to solve a lot more than 10% of the problems. Yeah. But for example, Microsoft Power BI, that is a reporting and analytics tool, right? Now, it isn't
a dashboarding.
It's a dashboarding tool. And there are lots of tools out there. We've talked about Aperio before. And Aperio's brilliant because it's integrated with the time recording stuff. It's much more current information.
And it knows about the legal stuff that you're doing. It's tailored specifically for that.
But if you are looking at a solution like that and you've made the decision that it's not for you at this time or whatever, then have a look at something like Power BI by Microsoft, because you will probably find that if you have a spreadsheet with all your data in that you want to drag it in, it probably is relatively straightforward process just to integrate it into BI and have a look at it in a different way. It might be that Excel can do it for you in a roundabout way, but those tools are all well integrated, and it gives you a lot of flexibility and functionality.
Well, it does, and like we're saying, you can probably look to a specific legal technology provider to provide you that dashboarding tool. Yep. But going down the route of something like Power BI means that, there may be a bit more upfront work to tailor it to your specific needs, but it will work quite happily for those legal needs, but also for the rest of the systems that you've got can be integrated with it as well. Yeah. So you've got a tool which can be used across all your platforms rather than something that is just tailored and specific to do one thing.
Exactly. So a couple of advantages in that, I think, and that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think as well, a lot of stuff when you take out the Office subscriptions and stuff, if you take out the enterprise subscriptions, you get a lot of this stuff bundled in with those subscriptions that you may not even know you have. Especially smaller law firms that have sort of the Office business plans and things like that. You get a huge amount of additional software that can be used for these kind of things bundled in as part of those plans that you've probably never even looked at.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I loaded up this surfaced, it all came free. I had Yammer, I don't know what that is. I had Planner, I have
probably Teams.
Teams. I think Dynamics, and I mean all kinds of things on there that Microsoft have just got that people just won't know about. So explore those, I guess, before you spend a load of money on something which you might not necessarily need, or if you've made a decision not to, then have a look at them, because you might get a lot of the functionality that you wanted there for nothing. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, so item number 3 then. This is another Legal IT Insider sourced article that we came across, which is about Deloitte Legal collaborating with UiPath as the UiPath in Bucharest. They're touted to become the low-cost legal tech hub for Deloitte. And it fits in neatly with what we've talked about before, where we mentioned EY's acquisition of the Thomson Reuters Enterprise Managed Legal Services arm. And we talked in that show, which was, I think, week 4, about the encroachment by the accountancy firms and others into the legal services space.
And in fact, Mark Cohen's article was previously as well talked about this as well.
Exactly, the one we mentioned last week in Forbes, Mark Cohen's article talks about that exactly. This week we're talking specifically about Deloitte. They have begun to collaborate with New York headquartered UiPath, which is a robotic process automation provider. Now, they're based in Bucharest, and that's where their center of excellence is. They're looking to become a hub for Deloitte's legal technology activity. Their aim is to design, develop, and implement cutting-edge robotic and cognitive automation solutions for clients around the world. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but the I suppose the short version of that is cheap and automated processing delivered out of Eastern Europe to deliver a cost-effective solution for Deloitte's legal clients, if you like, or to help the Deloitte legal arm deliver its work more cheaply. It isn't a legal managed service, but it's the same. It's the same essence. It's a cheaper way of delivering a formulaic process cheaply. I guess the question is, should firms be considering doing things like this themselves? They have these incubators and accelerator programs, but they're all individually. Should they be thinking more collaboratively?
Yeah, this was something we were talking about, in that there's so many organisations, it seems now, encroaching on the traditional legal firms and the services that those firms provide. Because with these new technology solutions and these automation processes and stuff, they can take on that legal work, or at least part of that legal work, and offer those kind of services where the traditional firms are not able to, invest in that side of things. So are we looking at now, you mentioned where people like Mishkondareya and that have their own, and Alan Overy have their own labs and incubators and stuff like that. Everyone's producing or looking to produce their own legal technology and things themselves, and looking at it in an isolated way. Is it time for some of these larger firms to begin collaborating together to try and compete against these new legal service people? I mean, for some of the big firms, they might not have the resources or the capital to spin up a whole legal services arm, or invest in their own legal technology and bring those things to market. But is there a way that they could collaborate together for the same goals? I mean, if you're looking at legal technology, for instance, you kind of want to be looking at technology which allows the interaction between these firms to happen faster and smoother. Yes, it's good to have something that reads contracts and things like that, but if you have a software package that allows the transaction management between the firms to happen quicker and more seamlessly, to speed up all these processes, then that's surely just an equal benefit to them.
Well, I think that's the key point, because if I'm managing partner of firm A and I'm looking at partnering with firm B, my initial immediate reaction is, well, why would I spend my firm's money, even if I'm only spending half of it, to help a competitor build a solution which is going to make their business better as well? That doesn't make any sense. But actually, it can make sense. We mentioned in week 3, we talked about National Grid and them wanting to not use the law firm solutions, but rather they had their own, and they want the law firms to use those
solutions.
Because why would they want to log into 5, 10, 15 different legal firms' platforms when they could just have their own, and the law firms are required to log in? So it's thinking, I think, a bit more about what does your customer want and what's best for your customer. And if maybe you're firm A and you're considering working with firm B, and you're often on opposite sides of a transaction because your client at firm A is a big retailer and they've got hundreds of stores, and your client at firm B is a big landowner like a Hammerson or a British Land or something, and you're constantly working together on all these deals, doesn't it make sense to have a centralized platform that would allow Hammerson and Next or whoever, for the sake of argument, to work together much more smoothly and collaboratively, bearing in mind it's a relatively fragmented market still anyway, the legal tech market. There are startups everywhere. There's got to be a process and of integration, and there's going to be some collaboration between the tech companies. The firms should probably be considering the same thing.
And I think the firm should be driving that as well. With these phases, and it's something that's happening elsewhere in the industry. People are realizing that rather than go it alone and force everyone to do things your way, it can be better to collaborate on these things. Microsoft have always pushed initially their Internet Explorer browser that recently became Edge in Windows 10. They've now taken the step that actually they're going to build their Edge browser on top of the Chromium platform, which is Google's browser. So Google Chrome is built on the Chromium platform. It's open sourced. Anyone can use it. You could download the source code to it yourself and create your own browser if you wanted to. But Microsoft have taken the step that actually, rather than invest in building our own browser from now on, we're going to use that open source Chromium browser as our product ourselves. And way outside of this kind of area, Microsoft and Sony are direct competitors in the video gaming industry. But there's become a challenge there from Google with new streaming technologies. And within the last week or so, Microsoft and Sony have announced a partnership whereby Sony will be using Microsoft's Azure data centers to host all their streaming services. So these are big organizations who are direct competitors, Microsoft with Google, Microsoft with Sony, and all these kind of things, but actually seeing the benefits of working together on these things. And in the legal tech industry and with all these incubators and things like that, I quite often see all these legal firms doing their own thing and fostering their own technology. And even within the legal tech startups and that, everyone going their own way and doing their own things, I think there's such an opportunity for collaboration between all of these people to work on things together.
I agree.
For the benefit of the whole.
It's hard to imagine more severe enemies than Microsoft and Google. Maybe Apple, but I mean Microsoft and Apple work together on lots of stuff now too, don't they?
Well, I mean, in building the iPhone, Apple primarily use Samsung display technology and chips and things in them, who are a direct competitor in the marketplace. These companies are able to work together.
I mean, and the Edge and Chromium example that you gave is interesting, not only because they're working together as partners now, but also Microsoft must have taken the view that, having built the Edge thing and realized that it wasn't getting any traction, they've invested a huge amount of money in that. And in the earlier incarnations of Internet Explorer, for which they back in the 90s, I mean, they spent millions defending themselves, didn't they, in US Supreme Courts against anti-competitive claims. They've obviously written off a huge proportion of their, it's spend that's gone. So, but it was a massive investment in the past, and it's been just written off.
They've decided it's just not the way to go.
In almost the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So they've seen a better way of doing it. So I guess it's a lesson from them to say, well, look, okay, we've gone this way. Actually, there is a better way. Maybe we shouldn't be afraid of saying, actually, we don't like the way we went before, and here's a new way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I don't think that the big established legal firms can afford to sort of sit still on this and wait for other people to jump. No. We've seen people like EY, we've seen people like Deloitte. These big organizations, far bigger organizations, are coming in and encroaching on this marketplace because, again, from what we were talking about earlier, is you don't always need a lawyer to do these things. Yeah. If someone can provide these legal services for cheaper, people will go there for those services.
Of course, yeah.
So, to be able to compete in the marketplace, we're not necessarily saying we expect to see mergers between these firms, but more collaborative working practices, I think, would benefit everyone.
They would. I think it's been for too long. It's been an industry of a bit sort of cloak and dagger and not being open and transparent with what they're doing. They now seem to be getting to the openness and the transparency, but not the collaborative element of it yet. And like you said offline earlier, these accountancy firms are a legitimate challenge now to the provision of legal services. They're doing it. They're doing it well. They're going to continue to do so. They're investing in it heavily. It's time to play catch up, and collaboration might be one way of doing it.
And like here, they're looking to produce the legal technology as well. All aspects they're looking at. So
yes. So should we look then briefly at events before we wrap up? A couple for you this time. The first one, the SRA, Solicitors Regulation Authority, have got an Innovate conference. They've actually two. So the first one is on Wednesday, the 5th of June, which is in Leeds. It's at the Studio in Riverside West. If you can't make the 5th of June, they have one in Birmingham on the 4th of July. They don't actually have the exact location confirmed yet on their website, so look out for it. That's some way off. SRA Innovate, they've got a long list of speakers there. They will be talking about all things legal tech, but also how they're working with lawyers and the regulatory issues that you face with technology aspects. They'd be talking about AI as usual, future of legal services, how to reach new clients and new markets through legal technology. So that's the 5th of June and 4th of July, Leeds and Birmingham. And then number two, sort of off the back of our Slater and Gordon article earlier, where we were talking about Microsoft. Again, Wednesday the 5th of June, Cavendish Venues, One America Square in London. Microsoft have got a transforming business processes with Microsoft 365. That's Office 365 and all the packages that we talked about earlier. Yeah. They will be having a run through what they have. Particularly, they're talking about discovering more about their applications. Microsoft Forms, I don't know what that is myself. Flow, Power Apps, Power BI. We mentioned a couple of them earlier. Yep. They're all fully integrated, like we said before, lots of times.
Again, probably something you've already got access to but aren't using.
Yeah, probably. So that would be a very easy and cheap way to go along and find out what you can actually do with all these things. We've been to Microsoft events before, and actually the guys there are pretty helpful and very happy to chat through what they've got. More than happy to chat through what they've got, because they want to sell you the packages, don't they? So that's Wednesday the 5th of June, Cavendish Venues in London.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention briefly for the more code savvy viewers?
Yeah, I mean, the Microsoft, as we mentioned before, I feel like we're getting very Microsoft branded as well. Maybe we should be wearing Microsoft t-shirts.
Next week.
I mean, it's one of those things where everyone used to loathe Microsoft for the stuff they were doing, but actually, if you look at the direction of that company now and the way that I think the CEO Satya Nadella is pushing that company, it is towards openness, and it is towards allowing people to use the Microsoft products wherever they are on any platform, and things like their new Azure data centers and services. You can equally use the Google ones and the Amazon AWS services, IBM as well, have them as well. All these people do. But, I generally like the direction that Microsoft are taking things and the way they're doing stuff. And some of this was shown in their Build event that happened in the last couple of weeks as well. Again, a lot of it was very tech heavy. It's a conference that's aimed primarily at developers, but they did talk a lot about the Office 365 and things like the cognitive services that they provide on the Azure platform. And there's a lot of things on there, especially the keynotes and stuff, that are probably worth a watch to go and have a look. So I'll put a couple of links in the descriptions and stuff to the podcast and the video, so that you can go and check those out as well. But I mean, that's something that we want to talk about, these tools which are out there and available for you to use now. And this is something that we want to come on to hopefully in the next week or so. We're looking to put together an additional sort of show which is going to cover some of the cognitive services that are provided by Azure, which you can use now. And we're primarily going to look at that on creating a chatbot. And how you can do that yourself with the minimum amount of code. In fact, almost zero code in some aspects. And how you might be able to take your first steps into using those kind of things.
Well, it's about client engagement, isn't it? And interacting with clients. And even though you will be displaying what is essentially the same information, it's displaying it in a new way. And if you've been onto a modern website and a chatbot has shown up on there, or do you want to have a chat with us? I mean, quite often people don't engage with those, but some do. And it's really although it might sort of, it would potentially sound limited if you were just sticking to what was already available on your website. It's really the potential that it unlocks for you in terms of A, the client engagement, but B, the next level of where you can potentially take this stuff. I mean, we know of, what's that application called? Do Not Pay, which is, I think it was started in America by a Stanford graduate, but it's big in the UK as well. The idea that you could challenge a parking ticket, I think it was, by just going and chatting to this chatbot. Well, that's clearly just a list of questions already entered and coded into the system, and depending on what your answer is, or how you reply to the question you're asked, it'll tell you about your claim. Everybody, I think, knows about it. There's no reason why those features and functions shouldn't be used by everybody. And as hopefully we will show how easy it is to get started with that.
So we're just going to take a very simple example and just show how you can get going with this stuff. A lot of the things that we want to be able to do is to demystify some of this stuff for you. Show that you don't need to spend thousands on complex developments and things like that just to get something up and running. And things like chatbots, I think there's a lot of talk of AI and stuff in the legal industries now, and using AI solutions. And I think that for a lot of it, you want to build up trust first. So take these simple steps to, dip a toe in the water, see what it's like, gain that trust of actually, these things do work and people do interact with them. Where can I go from there? If I take this first step and have an initial look at it, what are my next steps after that? Where can I go? And that's what we want to talk about and what we want to demonstrate.
Exactly. And I mean, the example might be that it's a frequently asked questions page, which is then converted into a chatbot feature, right? So, but the frequently asked questions page would be designed and created because you're asked the same question over and over, and you may as well stick the answer up because you're saving yourself the time in the admin. So the bot is the first generation or first phase, if you like, of the automated process of answering those questions. And I just want to keep people to keep in mind that that's just the beginning of the story. There's lots of potential with these things for automating processes and going down the idea of automated conflict checks and all sorts of things, which we could come on to in much more detail. But for the first phase, at least, we want to show how simple it is to get started, even for the firms that have virtually no tech presence.
I mean, this can be high street firms, single person firms where you might be able to put something on your website to allow people to interact in a different way.
Exactly,
that's hopefully coming in the next week or so. We're going to put something together on that. Stay tuned for that.
Do we need to say that in the light of, remember Natasha wrote to us a few weeks ago about changes in social media law, do we need to say that we're not being paid by Microsoft for all this for this advertising?
I'd rather say that we were being paid.
Much better
that would be of great benefit, so we could actually get some funds coming in. But
wonderful. That would be great.
Unfortunately, no, we aren't sponsored by Microsoft. So, but we're willing if you're interested. That would be great.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Unfortunately, all of our stuff is self-funded at the moment, and
self-funded and unbiased.
Unbiased at the moment, we tend to choose the tools and talk about the things that we're interested in.
Yeah,
so,
exactly, and what we think works best, frankly. So
exactly.
Microsoft are providing all the Office solutions. It makes sense that we talk about their technology.
Definitely. But if
great.
we wrap up there, shall we? And
finish there.
Yeah, and again, look out for the swing in the next week or so.
Yep.
But other than that, we'll be back again next week for the normal show as well.
Show.
Okay,
Yep, great.
That's
See you
great.
then.
Thanks, Sam. Bye.
Bye.